no regrets, no confusion. There'll be no pollution. I'm so thankful I've decided to change my ways.
Welcome back to the Leaving Eden podcast. It is the 4th of July weekend. You know what that means? It's a holiday weekend. That means Sadie is out of the office today. Sadly, sorry to all of you guys who love Sadie as much as I do. But nevertheless, I am joined by my good friend, Chad Harris, aka Archradish. You know him on the internet as Archradish85. Archradish, you've seen him in Shiny Happy People, Duggar Family Stories. He's here to talk to me about Generation Joshua and Christian nationalism. How are you doing today?
I am doing fantastic, and I'm so glad to be here. You know, if you ever need somebody who doesn't have a life on the weekend, I'm your first call. So, yeah, it's all good.
You're in Alabama, right? Not a lot to do on the weekend
I mean, you know, on the one hand, you know, it is kind of rural. On the other hand, there's a lot of space to blow stuff up if you're into that sort of thing on the forest. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you like hunting, you like fishing, you like outdoor stuff. I've heard that's nice down there.
Honestly, I'm an indoorsy type. As anyone who's ever seen me in person, they can tell you that right off the bat.
You stay indoors. You stay in that sweet, sweet, sweet air conditioning.
That's right. I do fish every once in a while, and by fish, I mean I'll take a chair out by the lake and take a nap for a bit.
Yeah. I wish it was all sunshine and rainbows and fishing and sitting outside and taking a nap in a chair by a lake, because that sounds like a lovely thing to do. But that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about Generation Joshua, which is it was like a youth outreach program, like a explicitly Christian nationalist youth outreach program that was produced by the HSLDA starting in the early 2000s, and it is ongoing.
Yeah, I was about to say, I hate to break it to you, but they're still active. And some of y'all who have seen Shiny Happy People probably remember this being covered on the 4th episode of the docuseries of the first season. It is a political action group that involves youth. They try to get youth, and particularly homeschooled youth, excited about politics, and much like Bill Gothard did with the IBLP, they tend to use, you know, youth laborers as, you know, their pawns to do all their dirty work for them, like deploying them to highly contested areas and everything to try to influence voters and stuff. I believe it was one of the higher ups at Generation Joshua. I was just reading an article where he said that homeschool teens are just about as effective as any union you could find. And to be perfectly honest, that seems to be our lot in life, those of us who grew up in that nonsense, because there was always some ministry or some scheme that was willing to use our eager and able labor, and Generation Joshua knew that, and that's how they got a bunch of us homeschooled, mostly cultist teens to do their bidding.
It seems like such an incredible loophole to the child labor laws. And I think it's even better than getting actual child labor, because, you know, with child labor, how much do they pay them? Like,
if that, I mean,
but they don't have to pay you guys anything. They could pay you in, I guess, brownie points for Jesus.
And experience, exposure, and the opportunity to get out of the house for a little bit and not have to basically babysit your younger brother while you're allegedly doing algebra. Oh, did I say that out loud?
So, were you involved in this at all when you were growing up?
I was involved in the proto stages of it before it became a thing. So, to kind of back it up, Homeschool Legal Defense, the HSLDA, was founded in 1983 by a man named Michael Ferris. He was actually pretty tight with Bill Gothard himself. He was a lawyer, and he had this brilliant idea, Ferris, that is, he had this brilliant idea to start an organization to convince homeschooling families that they needed legal representation. Now, you have to understand, in the 80s, you know, homeschooling was not as big as it is today and wasn't as widely practiced. So I remember my folks used to contribute and receive information from HSLDA themselves, because they were scared that in rural Alabama, in our double wide trailer, someone was maybe going to see me outside who wasn't a relative during school hours and call CPS on us and get me taken away. They essentially started reaching out to HSLDA because Homeschool Legal Defense promised that they would try to fight to get homeschooling legalized, which for the most part it already basically was, and to get represent homeschool families who might find themselves in legal trouble for whatever reason, based on their homeschooling their kids. So basically it was like a contribute to us and we'll represent you if something happens, much like the Christian Law Association and stuff like that.
Yes, I remember the Christian Law Association with David Gibbs.
Mm-hmm.
Also associated with the Vision Forum. And I mean, it's so interesting that the Vision Forum, they have their 200-year plan, mm-hmm. where you have as many kids as possible. And you essentially try to outbreed everybody else in the country so that you eventually, your population grows so much that you take over the country. And then you have this Generation Joshua, which is kind of taking that idea and saying, well, here's all of the things that we can do, where the rubber meets the road. We can use these children as labor for political organizations and political campaigns.
Absolutely. And you see these names, popping up over and over in these arenas, and of course, David Gibbs, also huge ties to IBLP and actually has spoken there the past couple of years for their annual conferences. Michael Ferris, very much involved with Bill Gothard and very much a part of the Quiverfold movement. According to some sources, he actually got started, he and his wife, in the Quiverfold movement with their family through the teachings of Bill Gothard. Bill Gothard's a law college that was started in association with IBLP, the Oak Brook College of Law, actually has several alumni go on to work for HSLDA. So all these people live in like this big bubble of grift and exploitation of children, pretty much.
I wonder where Bill Gothard's College of Law is ranked. Your Harvards, you have your Yale Law, you have your Columbia Law up at the top.
Well, I mean, considering that they've kind of cut ties with IBLP for the most part, is my understanding. The whole thing may have been founded by IBLP, but they're just kind of like now doing their own thing out in California, but still maintaining the name Oak Brook for some reason. But where they rank, I would probably put them under single-celled organisms as far as effectiveness, because there was a requirement at one point that people who attended the Oak Brook College of Law would have to go through the basic seminar of IBLP. I don't know if that's still the case, but that was a thing. So if your basis is that, yeah, that's kind of sad, really.
Well, if any of your graduates are actually passing the bar, then maybe it's not the worst way to get because not everyone passes the bar the first time. Half of the people. I have some friends who are lawyers, and half the people don't pass the first time. So if anyone's passing the bar from Bill Gothard's School of Law, that's a
I mean, hey, what does Saul Goodman have? The University of American Samoa, go land crabs. So, yeah.
Hey, man, people in American Samoa need a good college education. So,
by the way, that college does not exist. That was purely
it doesn't exist. Yeah. Oh, I was going to ask. I was like, I bet they have a good football team.
Maybe.
O-line is unbeatable.
But yeah, they probably still would have more qualifications as a fictional college than, any legitimate thing that HSLDA tried to do, because HSLDA was a two-pronged thing. They would, allegedly try to influence policy in various states and on the federal level, and, purport to defend homeschooling families from any unnecessary, in their view, government intrusion, which meant pretty much any kind of government oversight whatsoever. They would put out this newsletter every month where they would tell all these homeschooling families about the latest threats by state to the whole homeschooling movement and how they as an organization prevented it. I doubt the accuracy of a lot of their claims, and I don't have one of their newsletters in front of me, or I would, give you an example. But I do remember back in 2016 where I had gotten word that they had done a particular action in Kansas, 2015. And the story itself sounded sus. So I actually reached out to the district attorney or the attorney general, where they claim to have made this move. And he was like, I've never heard of this group or anything involving this case that they're talking about. So he actually had them retract their story.
Yeah, but that's just the devil attacking you.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. And I was the devil in that case, because I reached out and was like, hey, these people are talking shit. And he was like, oh, yeah, I mean, I've never heard of them. So yeah, there was some action taken on that, which to me asked the question how much of what they purported to do was actually true or, non-exaggerated. But and I'm sure at some point they probably legally represented some homeschooling families, or at least, made enough of a fuss to get people to back off of planned legislation. But at the same time, it kind of felt like a bit of a protection racket, at least in my view, because homeschooling families don't have a lot of disposable income. And to financially and otherwise support a legal defense association, that you have to gin up a lot of fear to do that.
Strikes me, when I was a kid, my parents were always giving money to either the American Civil Liberties Union or like the Southern Poverty Law Center, groups like that, where it would essentially be the same thing, where they would either like lobby Congress against whatever is, going on, especially, when I was a kid, the big issue for groups like that was like the Patriot Act and civil liberties and privacy rights and stuff like that. Then they would also come in and do legal defenses for people. So it just feels like it's the Christian nationalist version of that.
And I'm not mad at, lobbyists and legal defense funds and everything, because, they do great work. But homeschool legal defense, I kind of feel like found a niche of fear to fill. And even though they purported to support all homeschoolers, it was very clear, especially to secular homeschoolers who didn't want anything to do with those folks, that it was very right-leaning, very Christian right, very Christian nationalist, Christofascist, as it were, leanings that they had, which, made them very polarizing in conservative Christian circles. So it's, that was where all this came from, because once, they actually started normalizing homeschooling, then you have all these homeschooled kids out there who have spent their entire lives at home being indoctrinated in various Christian curriculums. And then, like Bill Gothard found, you could bring them into training centers and headquarters and have them do all your dirty work. These political bigwigs at this organization that had influenced some legislation from time to time, is like, well, why don't we do that? And that was where they started the Patrick Henry College in Purcellville, Virginia.
I've heard of Patrick Henry College.
And they started it. Homeschool Legal Defense. When I went to Patrick Henry College in 2001, Homeschool Legal Defense's offices were on the upper floor of the main Patrick Henry College hall. So everything downstairs is Patrick Henry College. Everything upstairs is HSLDA. And Michael Ferris was the founder of Patrick Henry College as well.
There's conservative and right-leaning universities that are somewhat more reputable than, like, George Mason is deemed as a very conservative institution, but it's still like a reputable institution. And then you have places like Liberty University, which are maybe less reputable. And then so where would Patrick Henry College rank on that kind of spectrum? Probably
along the lines of Bob Jones University, I would say, which, is, problematic in so many ways, and geographically not that far from Bob Jones University, but it's definitely much smaller. It's a small campus. When I went there in 2001, they had just opened. And the reason I went there in 2001 was they had just finished their first year of having students on campus where they only had one major, and that was government. So they had a student body of maybe 100 students, if that, maybe 300. It was a low number, but they had just finished their first year, and Michael Ferris immediately wanted to start holding teen camps during the summer.
So how old? So this was 2001. How old were you at the time? You're like 4 or 5 years older than I am. So I
was turning 16 at that point.
You're turning 16. Okay.
Yeah, I had my 16th birthday on campus at Patrick Henry College.
Man, I guess if you're homeschooled, then you can just say, oh, well, I graduated high school at 16 or 15. I'm a genius.
I did graduate at 17, but honestly, not by being a genius, mostly because my parents, looked at some of the books that I had finished and counted a bunch of extracurricular stuff as extra credit and said, good enough, you can graduate. To this day, I'm pretty sure my diploma is worth slightly more than the paper it's written on. But I mean, it fulfilled Alabama's, requirements. So there you have it.
Roll Tide.
Indeed. And War Eagle on the other side of the state. But I keep telling people I'm college football agnostic in that I'm not sure of the existence of college football. I'm not sure it exists. So, I'm an anomaly, basically. Indeed. But I can blend in, and I have been to a couple games, and they were nice. They just don't do a whole lot for me. That being said, Patrick Henry College, when they started, they went right into sports in debate and moot court. That was their campus sport when they first started out.
Oh man, how much I don't want to hang out with the debate kid from Patrick Henry College.
Oh, they had them, believe me. I think now they do like basketball and stuff, but back then they were like, debate is our sport, moot court is our sport. And I'm like, that sounds boring.
I did mock trial when I was in high school.
Yeah, they do that too.
Mock trial was fun, but for debate, I don't think I could do debate because I feel like for debate, you end up hanging out with the people who want to talk about politics for fun.
Yep.
If you're going to have a special interest and you're going to have a thing that it is that you talk about, politics is like graveyard tier.
Oh, I agree. And especially like in a sport or an activity that requires you to be passionate about something you don't believe in. Like you have to take the side of something that you personally would never, have a stake in or whatever. And I get it is to understand, how the other side thinks and stuff like that. And it does promote critical thinking for some things. I get that, but somehow PHC was able to twist that into radicalizing people even more into the Christian nationalism that they wanted to do. Because again, their one major at that time when they opened was government. That was their main focus.
We think of like Liberty University being the political arm of the evangelical church, as in, people who go to Liberty University get internships with, it's in Virginia. It's not too far from DC. People who go there get internships with Republican congressmen after they graduate. If you graduate from there and you're one of the it people, then you're kind of well set up for a career in politics. Mm-hmm. So it was Patrick Henry is even more specialized than that. Oh
yeah, and they were looking to go a more practical route. Now, by the way, I do want to mention too that they have expanded their offerings a bit. They have, from what I can see, 8 majors now, which is classical liberal arts, economics and business analytics, government, history, journalism and digital media, English, strategic intelligence and national security, and environmental science and stewardship.
I want to know what they're teaching in their strategic intelligence and national security.
Maybe they watch the clean flicks versions of all the James Bond movies.
You know what I think they do? Did you ever see Left Behind?
Yes.
Of course you've seen Left Behind. You know how at the beginning they're like, somebody's attacking the state of Israel, and then all of the planes get shot down miraculously? And that's what they're figuring out. They're like, who shot down the planes in the beginning of the Left Behind movie?
Was this the Kirk Cameron one or the Nick Cage one?
Oh, it's the Kirk Cameron one. I watched it a couple weeks back. I didn't even know that they did a remake with Nick Cage.
Oh, yeah. That being said, Patrick Henry College, they started out with the idea that anyone who went there would be focused on going into government as a profession in some form or another. And because Purcellville's maybe about an hour and a half outside of DC proper, for internships and other opportunities, they could work in the offices of congressmen, senators, and what have you, in order to fulfill that part of their academic life. So they basically were able to, feed all these students and everything into different conservative places of power in DC. And that was the whole point.
And that's not a particularly uncommon thing to have happen.
Right.
If, like, I went to a liberal arts school that's in Salem, Oregon, that is literally right across the street from the Oregon State Capitol. And so the friends that I had that were either like political science majors or pre-law or, you know, something that was like government adjacent, they would get internships at the state capitol working for state legislators, state senators, the governor, somebody.
Right. And yeah,
it's valuable work experience.
It is. But, you know, coming from a school where in order to even attend there, you have to sign off on a statement of faith that aligns with the school's, you know, religious outlook on everything, up to and including, you know, back in the day, you had to get permission from both sets of parents. If you were to get involved in a relationship with someone, you had to get permission from the school as well. You had to, you know, register all that. There were curse filters on the TVs in all the dorms. Every student using the network to access the internet had to sign up with Covenant Eyes back in the day with Patrick Henry College. Yep. Like, when you raise students in that environment and then kick them out into DC to work in these places of power and stuff, you basically have people who have been indoctrinated all their lives in these homeschooling bubbles, and then you keep them in a slightly controlled but a little more freedom than they had before bubble, and then you basically kick out these automatons into DC, you know?
Hey, Sadie here. If this is your first time listening to the Leaving Eden podcast, make sure you go back and check out episode 57. It's a primer episode for new listeners. That episode tells my personal story and gives you all the terms and information that you'll need to know going forward. Also, check out our cult true crime series, The First Family of Fundamentalism, so that you can get the whole cult story. If you like our show, you can support us by joining our Patreon, where we have extended and uncensored episodes as well as other bonus content available. You can also join in the discussion in our Facebook group. That group is called Eden Exodus. Tell a friend, tell a family member, tell your worst enemy. The Leaving Eden podcast is a fully independent podcast, and we really appreciate your support. Now, back to the show.
So Generation Joshua is like an offspring,
right,
of Patrick Henry College.
Yep, that's correct. So it started basically as an offshoot of Patrick Henry College in December of 2003. And I can tell you where a lot of that came from. So, you know, like I said, I attended the teen camps in 2001. When the teen camps became successful in 2001, they were just called Patrick Henry College Teen Camps. The next year, in 2002, they were called Patrick Henry College Teen Leadership Camps. And that's what they were known as for the next 2 years. And then Generation Joshua happened right after that, after Michael Ferris had written a book called The Joshua Generation, basically a manifesto for how future generations were going to carry on the work that the older generations of Christians had started by homeschooling their kids and, you know, sending them out into the world. So that it basically, in my view, started off from the success of the teen camp programs, and they wanted to kind of expand that into a more organized year-round political action committee.
I think it's quite telling that they call it Generation Joshua, that they name it after the biblical character Joshua, because for those who may not be familiar, in the book of Deuteronomy, Moses and Aaron, they die at the end of the book before they can cross over into Canaan, into the promised land, and they hand the leadership over to Joshua, and Joshua goes into the land and conquers it. And they, you know, there's the Battle of Jericho, and the walls come down, and they establish the kingdom. And so it is quite telling that they see it not just as, okay, well, we're handing the torch on to the next generation, but also this is something that we are going to conquer by force.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was their stated goal. Like, you know, like I said about IBLP, you know, world domination being the goal, that was the goal for Generation Joshua as well. All these different programs work together to foment the Christian Reconstructionist movement, which was this idea that you could rebuild American society and impact world society to be very Christ focused, and either usher in the return of Christ himself to, take it from there, or, do one last big Christianized push before the end times, depending on where you fell in your eschatology. But one way or another, it was all about gaining power to push forth a bunch of Christian nationalist ideas, which I don't know if anybody's been noticing has been happening a lot lately, and I believe by design.
There's been a very coordinated push across many different states trying to get laws passed through in different state legislatures while they have a friendly court system that is helping them do such things. That is enabling them. Yeah.
But even on top of all that, the people behind this, like Michael Ferris himself, he didn't just stop with HSLDA, Generation Joshua, and Patrick Henry College. He's still the Chancellor Emeritus at Patrick Henry College, even though he's moved on. But he eventually started working on such projects as the 1776 project, which was an answer to the
was it the 1619
the
project?
1619 project, basically. Yeah, it was supposed to be the Christian nationalist answer to that Donald Trump himself commissioned. Michael Ferris was one of the big contributors to that. Matter of fact, it was so bad that President Biden actually repealed it by executive order on his first day in office.
Oh, thank God.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, what was in it? Was it just like slavery was good, actually? Because that's the gist of what I got from the 1619 project was we did slavery. It was bad. Mm-hmm. Here's what we can try to do to fix it, possibly.
Yep. And the 1776 project was people who say that are trying to divide us, essentially. And we actually came from, very brave people, and we need to focus on the good and just ignore all that little thing that happened. It's the idea. It was basically what Florida is doing now, where you can't talk about slavery and the effects of it, and any kind of like racial justice and everything in public schools. It was that, but in a nationally endorsed project, and Michael Ferris was one of the contributors to it. Michael Ferris also assisted with one of the attempts by President Trump's legal team to overturn the election as well. So the same people that have been, pushing all these recent events and everything have been involved in continuing their, violent push against American democracy, in my opinion, and against religious freedom through things like Generation Joshua and Patrick Henry College. The idea is to sustain it for the long term. It's not just to make, certain people rich and powerful, though that is one of the main drivers.
I mean, that's a byproduct. That's how you get people on board with you who aren't necessarily down with your ideological bent.
Exactly.
They'll just say, oh, okay, whatever you guys want to do, Christian, whatever. What will you lower my taxes too? As long as you lower my taxes, I don't care about the other stuff.
Exactly. And they've had practice. They've been doing it for all these years. I believe that the early days of HSLDA in stirring up the fears of homeschooling families gave them the tools to stir up fears in the broader portion of the electorate that have supported things like Christian nationalism and what we're seeing today.
And the anti-woke movement, and they're coming for our kids. And
exactly. The anti-trans movement, definitely.
Anti-trans, yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So if you want a microcosm of what's happening with this large push in Christian nationalism, all you have to do is look at the actions of Generation Joshua, HSLDA, Patrick Henry College, and all the associated parts of the homeschool movement. It's essentially them trying to weaponize what they tried to build as an ideal society. Now, the good news is, for a lot of us, it didn't work. The bad news is, for a lot of us, it did. My parents really wanted me to pursue politics because I've always been something of a talker. I'm pretty sure your listeners will find that hard to believe. And someone who's always wanted to, be up there putting my ideas forth on a stage, which I'm sure they never live to regret ever later on in their lives, but for various reasons. But But yeah, I was dead set on going to Patrick Henry College when I got out of high school. I only set my ACT scores there because I thought, this is what I want. This is how I want to give back. This is how I want to live my life going forward for God. And it didn't work out for various reasons, but I remember, being disappointed, thinking, well, okay, I guess I'll, find something else to do. And eventually I found my way out of that entire mess, thankfully. But if I had gone through with it and been indoctrinated by PHC, and of course, PHC students also are leaders in the Generation Joshua movement. If I had been so steeped in it after my vulnerable post-high school years, I don't know where I'd be today.
Were you rejected from there, or did you just decide it wasn't the right thing from you?
To be perfectly honest, being a missionary kid, because I literally had to fly in from Belgium to go to the teen camps for 2 weeks and then go back. Being a missionary kid, we didn't have a lot of disposable income, and my parents just couldn't afford to send me to college. And I had no clue, being a homeschool kid, like what was going to be needed to sustain myself at college. So I was gunning for a scholarship. And from everything I was reading, I made like a 27 on my ACT, and I think scholarships. I made a 28, and the scholarship started at like 29. So I didn't know how to like look for any more of them or anything. So I just eventually decided, well, if I can't afford it, because at that time I was also in the very, conservative Christian, I'll never go into debt for anything kind of that. By the way, that
Dave Ramsey saved you from.
You know what? Actually, Bill Gothard had a Dave Ramsey light thing that I followed even before Dave Ramsey was a thing. So, yeah.
Bill Gothard have like a bootleg Dave Ramsey guy that was part of the. I would love to do an episode on that guy.
I can get you the book.
Please do. Please send that to me. I've got so many more books I need. I have Tia's book sitting on my shelf right now that I haven't cracked yet, but we're going to have her on. Sadie's read it already, and she's told me amazing things about it. She told me that it's very good, and I plan to read that because we're going to, I think, have Tia on as a guest in about a month or so, whenever it is going to be sometime around the time. But you send me that one, I'll read it too. The other book that I have, let me find it, is this one, and it's called, Chad can see it right now, you guys can't see it. It says, Gorbachev, Has the Real Antichrist Come?
Oh my God.
And this is a book from it was published in 1988. About how the Antichrist is Mikhail Gorbachev.
Oh, wow.
Before Pride Month, we were doing all sorts of like Revelation and Rapture stuff, and we decided to take a break from that because actually a lot of our listeners found it extremely traumatic, but some of, the people that liked it, but other people didn't.
Can I address that very quickly, though, in regards to the whole Joshua generation thing?
Oh, go for it.
Yeah. So, after the fall of the Soviet Union throughout the 90s, in my view, like a lot of fundamentalist Christians had a hard time trying to figure out who the next big bad was. Because, obviously there was Bill Clinton and there was a lot of conspiracies around him. But I remember my dad, trying to come up with all these theories about where the Antichrist could be coming from. And obviously he was going to come from Europe, so there would be something involving the euro, which, we lived in Belgium. We were facing down like in the 2000s and everything early. That was going to come, and maybe that was going to tank the economy, and someone would come and raise it up again. Like, it was kind of like grasping at straws for an Antichrist to come up or a bad guy. But when I went to Patrick Henry College for their teen camps, I remember sitting, because the way they were organized, the first week you learned all about constitutional law as a teenager. The second week you learned about journalism and so on. I was in their constitutional law class, and I remember Michael Ferris telling us that, every so often the Supreme Court has like this, or there is a major event that completely changes how the Supreme Court does things and how they, rule and stuff like that. And he figured we were about due for that. Well, 2 months later, or 3 months later, rather, 9/11 happened. And you can, and you can see where things went from there. Suddenly we had a big bad again. Suddenly there was like this, big push by Christian fundamentalists to, validate their worldview in government and everything. George W. Bush was in the White House at that point, and Patrick Henry College, I believe, rode a lot of that wave to continue to attract more students and more allies in Washington.
Right, because I've seen, so many fundamentalists, throughout the years being like, clearly Obama is the Antichrist.
Mm-hmm.
Because, first it was the terrorists, the Al Qaeda, whatever. And then it was Obama after Obama came in. But now, I mean, I guess some of them think that Joe Biden's the Antichrist. He just doesn't have that Antichrist sauce for me.
Yeah.
He doesn't. I don't see it.
No, it's apparently now woke is the Antichrist or something. Yeah.
Transgenderism and the wokest movement. I don't know. It just seems to me like they do get to, when there isn't a big bad, they do have to kind of grasp at straws to, like, I mean, Bill Clinton's not going to be the Antichrist. He played the saxophone on Arsenio.
You would not believe, though, how many people genuinely thought that he could be. I remember even before the internet was ubiquitous. Oh, God, I just realized how young you were. Back in the day. I remember, pre-internet days. I remember I was born in 93. So I remember when we upgraded from Windows 95 to Windows 98. I remember that. I remember when, going on the Sports Illustrated for Kids.com, playing the online games, the flash games that they had on there. I remember playing backyard baseball. That was like, I remember those pre-internet computer days. Yeah, and I was born in 85, so I remember like even before that. So like in 93, right about the time you were born, I remember that Bill Clinton had put out this or was supporting this idea called Goals 2000, which was, basically like a roadmap for how education should improve by the year 2000. And everybody in our church, were handing out flyers and, just manually spreading around this information saying like, oh no, the government's going to take over our schools and make homeschooling illegal. And I believe a lot of that came from HSLDA as well. Some of that fear mongering. And, this is back when you had to manually call your senators and Congress people. And my understanding is like for a lot of that stuff, they kept the phone lines tied up for hours and everything, bothering the people in Washington. So like back then, it was very grassroots and very low tech, but they were effective at mobilizing these very vocal parents that they had whipped up into a frenzy. And that's where a lot of what we're seeing now, in my opinion, that's where, it fed into these machines that would spit out more Christian nationalists.
When there isn't like a big bad, when there isn't like an Antichrist, like a single person, like you can point the finger at like wokeism or transism or, whatever that they want to point the figure or pejoratively speak about and point the finger at. But when there isn't a singular big bad person that they can reputably say is the Antichrist that has, do they tend to kind of like spin their wheels? Like, what is it? Is that where like it almost seems like it's like, when a virus is about to die and it just starts replicating and replicating and replicating and replicating until it finds something that can beat whatever antibiotic it's being killed with.
Mm-hmm.
After the presidential election, after Donald Trump was no longer in office and Joe Biden was inaugurated, and you had all these people that were doing, the Trump meltdown or whatever, that you can see those videos online where they're like, wait, he's been in, they're not, doing the storm to have happen. They're not trying all these people by military tribunals and executing them on live television. What? I was promised this would happen by QAnon. And then rather than getting broken out of it, they say, oh, now we have to figure out what's next.
Yeah. It's, the goal is always to gain power over society or maintain the power that they've enjoyed for so long at any cost. So, the big bad doesn't have to even be a person per se. It's easier to focus on people, but it can be groups of people, it can be an idea, it can be like an economic system. Basically, if they can make you afraid of it, they can mobilize you to push against it. Consider how many people were convinced that the COVID-19
or the vaccine's the mark of the beast.
Vaccines, the mark of the beast. Mask wearing is some kind of plot to keep, religion down somehow.
Or was the Save the Children thing where if you see a child wearing a mask, it's because that child has like a gag and they're being like trafficked or something for the evil cabal of pedophiles that are kidnapping children. And that's why they're making children wear masks. That was the one,
which is hilarious because in not in a funny way, but in a weird way, because we're talking about the same kind of people who then take children and then have them work in things like Generation Joshua, IBLP, and all these other where they are literally exploited, sometimes in the worst possible way, but definitely through labor. They are the ones doing the exploiting, and they do it by fomenting this fear in the parents of these children through all these nebulous, conspiracy theories. And, again, the homeschooling movement, was fraught with fear. I grew up thinking that at any point people were going to kick down our door and steal me away from my parents and make me go to gasp public school. That was a legit fear I had instilled by my parents. And it was exacerbated by people like Michael Ferris and the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And with the fear came the answer: we'll take care of your kids. Just send them to our programs, send them to our school. We'll make sure that they become the warriors for God that will, make us safe forever.
Everybody always seems to have just, the one thing that's the answer. Yeah. You create a problem for somebody and then you sell them the solution. That's kind of the.
And if you've seen The Music Man, you've seen the formula. Oh no! You got trouble, my friend. You have a pool table, and that means your kids are going to be terrible until they get into a band.
It's a capital T that rhymes with P, and that stands for
capital pool. C that rhymes with, or that stands for cult, basically.
Yeah. Capital C also stands for Christ and.
Indeed. But yeah, it's anything that fear based. You can, it motivates people and it, bypasses their critical thinking and gets them involved in these scenarios. And, that's, and it's a shame because, even if the Generation Joshua has, not, been very visibly, influencing things. Like if you just look at their Wikipedia page, they have a whole list of notable people who have been through, in particular, like Patrick Henry College. But
you know what I saw? I saw one name, which was Madison Cawthorn.
Oh, Madison Cawthorn, most definitely. And of course, even though he's now out of power, for a long time, he was one of the most outspoken and attention-grabbing members of Congress, if nothing else. The fact that he even made it there when he clearly had no qualifications to do so, he even dropped out of PHC after sexual abuse allegations. That was, he had no business being in Congress in the first place. And yet through the connections that he had made in that world, he was able to get there.
Well, I read about this, and apparently he just lied and lied and lied.
Yep.
About, because he was running against an incumbent, and he lied about them being a never Trumper or something like that. And enough people believed him that they voted for him instead. And then he won because it was a safe district. And I don't want to speak disparagingly on the intelligence of like everybody who's ever been who's been a part of this movement, but a lot of the people that I've seen or that you see publicly, they just seem like they're not smart people, or that they're not critical thinking people, that they're people who have been told what the right answer is, and they're like, I know the right answer, so I'm going to say whatever the right answer is.
Yep.
And there's nothing deeper than surface level. And I'm sure that these people, maybe they have deeper thoughts on other subjects, but not these ones.
Oh yeah, and I agree. I think it is more accurate to say that their critical thinking has been compromised because, these high controlling groups, these cults, these people who are looking to gain power on the backs of others, it's my firm belief that they have figured out, these formulas. Going back to the whole fear thing, once you have your big bad, once you have the attack on your children, once you have all that lined up, you're able to get them to go along with what you're saying because you have the clear, easy solution, the way out. Or as Bill Gothard said, we have for everyone the answer. In his group, like it all comes back to the people who got us involved in the Quiverful movement and IBLP in the first place was a doctor in his family, like not dumb people. We're talking a man who was a OBGYN, got us into the Quiverful movement. So somehow at some point, he had been taught, that the thing that he needed a solution for had a very easy solution. And all he had to do was follow whatever this leader said. And that is how I believe these, I feel sorry for, my colleagues or my fellow students who grew up in homeschooling and followed it all the way through because they have never been able to experience life outside of their bubble. Even if they step outside their bubble into the quote unquote real world, many of them have been policed into keeping themselves involved, or in the cases of people like Miles and Gawthorne, they have figured out how to exploit those who are in fear and those who are looking for an easy solution and a leader to get them out.
You've met Michael Ferris.
I have, yes.
What are your impressions of him, having met him personally?
I believe he's a very ambitious fellow. I believe he enjoys being connected to powerful people. When we were in his talks in 2001 at the teen camps, because he would come and talk to us and teach us some lessons during this whole week, he bragged about having seen George W. Bush enough to actually get a nickname. And from what he understood, if you get a nickname from George W., you're in. He said, the problem is he calls me Mikey, and that's upsetting. And I was just like, of course, we all laugh, but I was like, oh, okay. So, like, this guy likes to name drop.
It was kind of a star. He's got like weird star energy. That's
because and he would always talk about his failed lieutenant governor run for Virginia. He would always talk about being on the Phil Donahue show once. He talked about arguing. He did legit argue a case in front of the Supreme Court once, and he talked about getting a one-liner over on one of the justices who misspoke about something. And he would just brag about these things all the time. So you could tell that it really attracted him. In my view.
He's the kind of person where his highlight reel is the stuff that actually powerful people forget about in their sleep.
I mean, he did work for Donald Trump, but I'm pretty sure that Trump probably wouldn't be able to pick him out of a crowd,
I mean, Donald Trump can't remember his own name at this point.
True.
I mean, but that's the sort of, but like that is so on brand, is that the only people who are really in with Donald Trump are either getting something out of him or they're just like weird star who are just like, this is the most famous person in the world. I want to be around him. He went to Western. He went to Western Washington in the Beham in Bellingham. Andy, he went to Gonzaga.
Michael Ferris actually told us during Constitutional Law Camp that one of the goals for Patrick Henry College ultimately was for the future president of the United States elect to be a Patrick Henry College graduate. And for him on Inauguration Day to walk up, place his hand on the Bible, and swear the oath of office to the Chief Justice of the United States, who was his classmate at Patrick Henry College.
That's icky.
Yeah. But again, that was how ambitious this man is. He wanted his work to affect all levels of government.
I mean, when I said star, that's like galactic star.
Yeah.
Level. Man.
Yeah. I mean, he has legit creds and everything.
Yeah.
He just figured out like how to exploit a very particular part of society in order to advance his own goals. By the way, I forgot to mention too that one of Trump's head of communications and everything also graduated from Patrick Henry College and was part of all of Michael Ferris's world. That is Alyssa Farah Griffin. the daughter of Joseph Farah of WorldNet Daily. She actually went to Patrick Henry College and eventually became Donald Trump's director of strategic communications.
Yeah.
But she's also very connected because Joseph Farah of WorldNet Daily was one of the, biggest political, like alt-right or far-right tabloids on the internet.
I mean, it's just, it's so crazy to me. I mean, I guess it is, I have to just keep remembering, last week we talked about the documentary, the Dancing for the Devil, the TikTok documentary. And when Robert Shin, who was the head of Shekinah Church, got, caught with the sexual abuse allegations, he immediately pivoted to, I'm King David. And that's the same excuse that they use for somebody like Donald Trump to justify being involved with him. And it just seems so just icky to me that these people who are supposedly pious and supposedly, I guess, like teetotalers in every sense of their life are involved with a man like that. And deeply puritanical people are involved with a man like that. And it just seems totally insane to me. But, it's...
But what does King David represent in that context?
Power.
Exactly.
Right.
And, the connection to power is just too seductive. People like Michael Ferris who, bragged about... Nobody in the room we were in had ever seen the Phil Donahue show, even when it was on, because we weren't allowed to watch such trash. But he bragged about being on it.
I've never even heard of the Phil Donahue show.
Oh, it was a big talk show back in the like the 80s and 90s. It was basically the precursor to Maury Povich and everything today.
Oh, yeah. I didn't watch that kind of TV growing up.
And we were allowed to, but I
was a PBS kid.
Yeah. Oh, I wasn't even that.
I watched Arthur. If we watched TV news, it was PBS NewsHour.
Well, I will say, before we threw out the TV, my favorite PBS show was way before your time. It was called Square One TV. If you ever get a chance, look it up. It's well worth your time.
The reason why I ask about the people themselves is that, like, clearly their attempts in some sense have failed to this point. But there's still a chance, going forward that they might be successful. And so the reason why I ask about the people themselves is because when you look at, the people who have been successful in either, restructuring the government to suit their needs, it seems like these can't be the people that will do that. Like these, I don't want to say non-thinking, but these, they're serious, but these deeply unserious people with deeply unserious beliefs.
Oh, yeah.
Can't be the ones that will successfully do that.
Well, this goes into one of my little pet theories, in that the people who truly benefit from these, far-right Christian nationalist groups and these cults and these organizations that want to, keep spreading this ideal and gain power, like, I feel like the people who truly benefit from them are the people who are in on the con. So Michael Ferris, for example, he was very closely associated with Bill Gothard for a long time. Bill Gothard received from Homeschool Legal Defense back in, I want to say, 2011, a Lifetime Achievement Award for his contributions to homeschooling. 2014 rolls around, and the allegations against Bill Gothard for his sexual harassment of his workers and, basically the girls at headquarters, comes out, and Michael Ferris distances himself from it, saying he was never really comfortable with the idea of Christian patriarchy. Meanwhile, he was
really
involved in the Quiverful movement. Yeah, he wrote a big, long article about it, saying, he feels like, the whole Christian patriarchy thing was, something of a mistake and everything. And I'm like, but you have promoted it all these years. You yourself have been a part of it. And, it just blew my mind. But again, I believe he's in on the con, because he's able to, publicly distance himself, and everybody's going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Not look at his record, just look at what he says today, because they want him to be the good guy. They need him to be in a position of power. And I believe that's what people like Madison Cawthorn learned. The people who truly gain something from it are those who realize, I don't have to actually believe this. I don't have to actually abide by the rules. I just need to appeal to those who do. It's a con. It is no different than, any get rich quick scheme or any kind of
they're all scammers. They're all like,
bait and switch scheme ever. It is all a con.
Do you remember NFTs? Remember that? That's snake.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. I do indeed.
Anyway, Chad, I want to say thanks for coming on. This has been a very enlightening episode. I thank you for teaching me about this topic because I didn't know a lot about it before you came on. And I would love to have you back. You're welcome back anytime. Anything that you want to promote, anything that you want to pitch. If you have an idea for an episode, just let me know.
Certainly. People can find me on TikTok, Archradish, for as long as TikTok is up. I've been taking a bit of a hiatus for personal reasons, but I plan to be doing content soon. Also, I'm on, thank you, Instagram as Archradish85, because Archradish was already taken for some reason. And if anybody wonders, Archradish is just Chad Harris mixed up. That was the big secret behind that. So, check me out. And I talk about Christian nationalism. I talk about fundamentalism. I talk about cults and how to fight against them. And every Sunday on TikTok, I like to get together with some of my fellow people who have an interest in this. And we enjoy a Sunday morning not church whenever I finish my first coffee for the morning. So join me on that, and we'd love to have you. And again, I can't leave here without saying that this podcast in particular, Leaving Eden, has been a huge boon to me as well. And to be here talking to you, Gavi, and to be part of this and everything has been amazing. And thank you for your work as well.
Well, thank you. Man, you're my guy, man. Appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much. You can follow the pod at Leaving Eden Podcast on everywhere that we're on social media, and you can follow me at GAVRIELHACOHEN on whatever social media I'm feeling like using these days. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. You guys have a great day. Bye-bye.
But old rolling river of time, you healed me into many days. No regrets, no confusion, there'll be no pollution. I'm so thankful I've decided to change my ways. I'm so thankful I decided